We're going to do a head-to-head, a $3,000 8-core Intel laptop versus Apple's new M1 MacBook Pro, which is really changing the game. We're seeing which is best for professionals, people who do Facebook ads, do marketing, or photo or video editing. The exact computer that we are comparing it against is the 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro, the $2,800 version, which has the i9 processor. The 16-inch is fairly in line with other relatively high-end professional laptops you could find between 2017 and 2019. Apple tends to charge a little bit more, but the 16-inch was actually very competitive. If you're a professional that uses your computer for 40, 50, 60 hours per week, even a speed boost of 5% or 10% can have a huge impact over several years. Why are people so excited about these M1 Macs? Well, for the longest time with computers, like Apple, they would have Intel chips and different graphics processors, and now they're making their own chips and putting everything on a single chip. And you will see that this has led to things being quite a bit different in a number of areas. I will be giving scores throughout, and while some scores are a little more scientific, I did really want to factor in my own experience having used each computer every single day for several months. First up, we're going to look at CPU speed, starting with the single core. All computers will use a variation of single core and multi-core for different tasks. Usually more demanding and challenging tasks will be done by multi-cores. So something like opening a single web page or a notes app will be more handled by the single core. So the M1 Mac is actually significantly better on the single core using Geekbench 5, getting a score of 1286 versus 894 on the 16-inch Mac. So the M1 is 44% better at CPU single core. For multi-core, the M1 won again, this time with a score of 5642 versus 4627 on the 16-inch, which is 22% better. So let's look at GPU, or the graphics card, which I expected the 16-inch to be quite a bit better, and it did perform better. I ran it for OpenCL, where the 16-inch got 26,000 versus 18,000 for the M1, so the 16-inch was 41% better, but I find more common it uses metal for the graphics rendering, and in that case, the 16-inch was 29,000 and the M1 was 21,000, so the 16-inch scored 36% better in terms of graphics performance. I ran the disk speed test multiple times and found that the M1 Mac had a 29% faster write speed and a 17% read speed. I did transfer some larger files. They finished in about the same amount of time, but I think that was a limitation of how fast that thumb drive was. It did transfer very quickly on both of them though. I did an hour's worth of work doing Facebook ads on the 16-inch followed by the M1 back to back to see what differences I found, and I did find the M1 was quite a bit snappier at loading the different pages in Facebook Ads Manager. I felt that I was moving quite a bit quicker and I could see a noticeable difference. I did record a little bit of my screen so you can see this for yourself. Trying to figure out the speed I was doing different things on the internet was interesting to compare because it's a combination of your internet speed, your browser, as well as the actual speed of your computer, but it was very noticeably faster and more responsive, especially working with Facebook. I then saw how quickly I could load 8 different web pages and they finished in around the same time. I didn't really notice a speed difference there, and that wasn't a super scientific one, just kind of seeing how quickly they were loading the same pages on the two computers. Not every program is updated for the M1 Max, but you can actually use Rosetta where it can still run all those apps and actually run them very well. They're not quite as quick as apps that have been updated already, but I didn't run into any app that I could not open or that ran really poorly. I'm showing this in double speed. The next test was opening 10 different applications, and the M1 was the clear winner here. I then ran a test opening different folders and files on both computers. M1 was slightly faster, but both of them were really lightning fast. So slight advantage to M1 here. For editing, I ran a number of tests exporting footage in Final Cut Pro X as well as Premiere Pro. I started out with a 2.5 hour 1080p clip without any effects or things like that, and I was really impressed. The 16-inch did it in 19 minutes versus 25 minutes for the M1 MacBook Pro. I did the exact same test in Premiere, and the M1 Mac did it in 25 minutes, and the 16-inch did it in 22. So 16-inch was a little bit faster in Final Cut versus Premiere, and the M1 was exactly the same in both. For the next one, the M1 actually beat the 16-inch, exporting 10% faster, but for the following one, the 16-inch did 45% faster, and on the last one, it really handily beat the M1, doing 2.5 times as fast, doing it in 3.5 minutes instead of 9 minutes. This was for MP4 files and MOV files. There are some file formats where the M1 is significantly faster to work with and export. So the 16-inch was definitely faster at exporting videos. Not way faster, but definitely faster. But I wanted to see how it was actually using each editing program. How quickly did things load? How much did I have to spend time waiting on it? And I was actually surprised. I did feel like the M1 was actually faster. It just felt more responsive. This actually took forever. I hand counted 4,000 frames just for you to see how many frames it was dropping in playback for both computers. So for the first clip, the M1 Mac drops 29% of frames versus 32% dropped for the 16-inch. So a little bit better for the M1. And then for doing titles, the M1 Mac dropped 10.5% versus 15% for the 16-inch. So that's actually almost 50% better in terms of frames dropped. The M1 was playing things back smoother, it was dropping less frames and did seem snappier, so I'm actually going to give this one the win when it comes to my video editing workflow, because you spend most of the time actually in the editor and a lot less time actually exporting the video. Unfortunately, I did have 8 of my plugins that have not been updated to work with M1 Max, so they do not work at all right now. So if you're using it professionally, definitely check into that. You may have some tool that's really required for your job that is not currently working, that you'll have to wait for them to update. I then opened a large photo in Photoshop, applied a dozen filters, and then duplicated that photo a dozen times and tried to do all of the different functions. And both these computers are insanely impressive. I was really not waiting on the program to load at all. If I had to pick between the two, there was 1 or 2 times where the M1 Mac loaded for like a quarter of a second. It didn't actually impact the workflow, but maybe a slight edge. Now this one is running under Rosetta. It hasn't been officially updated to work with the M1 Max, but really both of them are working so well. We've really reached a point where I'm spending hardly any time waiting on these two computers. I'm seeing very few beach balls. Really, one time I was doing a project with a ton of complex titles, and that really slowed things down. But for everyday tasks, they are instantly loading and I'm not waiting at all. Now let's cover the built-in camera, microphone, and speakers. I could not tell the difference between the different microphones. You can hear it for yourself, but I think they're probably the same microphone. I'll play these back to back since this is the exact same audio. It's pretty sad that both computers still have a 720p camera. This is in the evening in a well-lit room, and now I'll show an example if this room had a lot less light. I now have a lot less light so you can see what it looks like in low light, but I have been in a lot of similar scenarios with a similar amount of light. I did find the M1 applied a lot of noise reduction and did a fairly good job and came out with a much better looking image. If you really care about image quality, for about $50 you can get a 1080p webcam that's going to be higher quality, but that is kind of a pain. Now let's talk speakers. The 16-inch has absolutely insane speakers, which are so loud and clear, but the M1 actually was very impressive too. It was a little bit quieter, but still very loud, maybe 10% quieter. I did feel like the 16-inch was quite a bit fuller and overall a better sound. You'll want to watch this video all the way through if you want to go from beginner to expert at Facebook ads. We're actually going to launch an entire campaign in this video from start to finish. We're going to do brainstorming, actually write all of the copy, learn copywriting, create all the video and photo ads, and then launch it into a full campaign. So the 16-inch speakers are better, but the 13-inch were very loud, very impressive. You could do professional work at the exact same level. And I actually found for some quiet dialogue, the 16-inch, its fans would get insanely loud, which would kind of cover up the voices, whereas on the M1, the computer was completely silent. So I could actually hear the audio and the voices a little better with the M1 in some cases. Leave a comment if you agree or disagree with my rankings, and like while you're down there. Now let's cover an area where these computers are vastly different, and that's in terms of heating up, running the fans, as well as battery power. Here's where the difference is insane. With the M1, I have never ever heard the fans turn on. It's never got so hot that I couldn't touch it. Oftentimes it's actually surprisingly cool. Whereas the 16-inch Mac, sometimes it would spin up like a jet engine was starting up. Even when I was doing basic tasks, sometimes it would get really, really hot and difficult to touch. So there's a huge difference there. But the thing that matters to me the most is the difference with the battery. I had both computers at 100%. I unplugged them both and did really intense editing for 80 minutes. The 16-inch went from 100% down to 28%. The M1 went from 100% to 88%. I have a plug at my desk, and even if I only work there for 2 hours, that will charge it all the way up. And then I do not have to bring a charger with me anywhere, to a coffee shop, working on the sofa, working outside, at a park, anything. I do not bring a power cord with me, and I have never come close to running out of battery. This is actually a bigger time saver than I thought it would be. Just the time, moving the charging cable all around, or at a coffee shop looking for a place to plug in and not finding one and things like that. It is so nice to be untethered from a cord for long periods of time. I'm looking forward to being on a flight and being able to video edit the entire way without running out of battery. It's also nice that the computer can actually charge up faster. Going from 70% to 100% took a little over an hour on the M1 Mac and about an hour and a half on the 16-inch. However, when I was doing heavy editing, the M1 Mac took 2 hours to go from 70% to 100%. And the 16-inch actually went down. It was losing battery power because what it was doing was more intense than the power it could suck in. I ran frames per second benchmarks in around a dozen different video games, and I did find that the 16-inch MacBook Pro performed about 19% better on these various games. So advantage to the 16-inch here. Now let's talk ports. 16-inch definitely has an advantage here since it has 4 different ports, 2 on one side, 2 on the other, versus only 2 on the left side with the M1 Max. So with the M1, it's important. I use like a USB hub that you can plug a bunch of stuff into, and it provides power. That's pretty important. And it's important to have the right connectors. Once you get that set up correctly, it's really not a big inconvenience, but it is nice having the 4 different ports to plug things into. Overall, I have been impressed with the compatibility. I haven't found any applications that won't work on the M1 Mac, but there are various plugins, even certain like video games or things that haven't been updated and are not working, which as a professional, that can be really bad if there's an essential tool that is not working. Usually you can look that up beforehand, but that's an advantage with the 16-inch or Intel Macs in general. However, when it comes to future compatibility, Apple has made it clear that going forward, they are going to be moving all their computers to this like single chip M1 style ARM chips, and that everything is going to be made specifically to work with those style chips. And you never know, they may kind of phase out being able to work with Intel at a certain point. So I do think the M1 gets a win in terms of future compatibility. One big pro of using an Intel laptop is you can actually use Boot Camp, where you boot up your computer running Windows and it runs really well. There's some workarounds with M1, but you can't use Boot Camp and run Windows in the same way. There is a big downside to the M1, and that's that you can only drive one external display. So if you have 2 or 3 set up, you won't be able to power them. Some people have kind of found some workarounds, but just plugging in normally, you can only drive one screen. Now this works for me. I have an ultra-wide monitor, which is just the one, but that is a downside, especially if you already have existing monitors that you want to run. Let's talk 13-inch versus 16-inch. Both displays are the same brightness, the same number of pixels per inch, but obviously the 16-inch is bigger. Now, I've always had a 15 or 16-inch laptop because I use it professionally and needed the extra speed boost. However, I found myself actually gravitating toward the 13-inch. It is just so light and portable. Now the 16-inch is feeling a little bulky. Now, it is nicer if you're doing stuff in a bunch of tabs and different multitasking things, having that extra screen space on the 16-inch. However, I do have an external monitor, so usually when I'm doing stuff in many tabs, I'll use that external monitor. If I didn't have any external monitor, I would likely prefer the 16-inch for that multitasking, but with the external monitor, I do think the 13-inch I actually prefer. So the 16-inch MacBook Pro has 4 ports instead of 2. It can drive multiple external displays. It has louder, clearer speakers. In terms of compatibility, all the different plugins and things like that for the programs work, not so much with the M1 Mac until they're updated. And it can run Windows Boot Camp. The gaming performance is 20% better, and I found it was overall faster at exports. However, I'm blown away by the M1 Mac. I feel like there's several features that no other laptop can really compete with right now. And I just found that almost everything, the programs felt snappier. I felt like I was a little bit more productive, and I was getting my work done a lot faster. I absolutely love my 16-inch, but for me, doing Facebook ads, marketing, photo editing, video editing, this is better in most ways, and I would actually choose the M1 over the 16-inch, even if they're the same price, not $1,000 difference in price. So if you're contemplating switching from an Intel to something like an M1 MacBook Pro, here's a few things you want to think about. In 2021, it's likely they'll come out with an updated 16-inch that has a new chip like the M1X or the M2, which is likely going to have like double the graphics performance, and it is going to be faster. It will also likely cost more like the 16-inch have in the past. I think it could be worth waiting if you have plugins that you need that have not been updated so they work with M1 Macs at all. And if you really need incredibly fast graphics performance, that could be worth waiting. Really, doing complex titles was the only time the computer was really slowing me down with the different work I was doing. At a certain point, a computer gets fast enough. There's not a whole lot of difference needing to wait 1/50th of a second versus 1/100th of a second. The resale value of different like Intel laptops will likely go down over time, so that's another factor to consider. If you haven't taken my 18-day Facebook ads training, you can opt in with your email right there. You'll receive a brand new lesson in your email every day for 18 days. Also be sure to check out my copywriting video right over there, as well as this training right over there. Anyway, give this a like. Thank you so much for watching.